the UI stuff that we kind of talked about last time. It's going to be on an iPhone and for an iPad, just a list of cars. And yeah, so the list that you'll see, we're going to use something called a table view. So I'm going to start a new project, create a new Xcode project, and this time we're going to do an iOS application. It's going to be a single view application, and then I'm just going to name it car trader or auto trader. And
That might catch on.
yeah, it's revolutionary.
Yeah.
You can look at these
That's
I can send you the links. I didn't get to see if they're any good.
Oh no, I already have one. Auto Trader 2, I guess.
Auto Trader 2.
So I'm gonna run this app. First thing I do whenever I get a new app is make sure it compiles. So I just will hit Command R and that'll run it. And up here is where you select. These are called schemes, and that's actually how you select which app you're going to run. You can have multiple apps in this project right here, so you can have a bunch of different apps. And so I'm going to select Auto Trader 2, and I'm going to use, I generally use like either iPhone 8 or the iPad Air 2. I don't know why, it's just like what I use. So I'm going to build to the iPhone 8 simulator, and so as soon as I build, it's going to bring up my simulator and it should show a white screen. This is already out of the box, ready for you to start coding on. So it's installing it on the simulator, and now this is it. This is all there is to it.
Where was the simulator button? Sorry.
The simulator button, these are the schemes, and you select a scheme, and then you choose which simulator you want to build it to.
And then you bring it up.
And then once you actually hit the play button, it should bring the simulator up for you. So the way this works is there is in your project settings right here something called the main interface. So when you first build your application, it's going to look for a storyboard. A storyboard is a XML file that we kind of talked about last time. It is like the base of like your UI. If you provide a storyboard name, this is already in there. They named it main, and so it's going to link to this main.storyboard, which is already provided to us. And so if I open up main.storyboard, there's an arrow pointing to where your application is going to start. And then this is the view controller that we see, and there's nothing special about it other than it's just a white view controller. It's just a white view. And so this is where you can start dragging and dropping some items onto this screen to get it up here for your application. So I'll just go over this list, I guess, a little quickly. But these are the items that you can start adding to it. There's the table view controller, which is another view controller like this, but we're not going to use it. Tab bar. Here are your labels and buttons, the little switch icons, stuff like that. We're going to use something that's called the table view. And so this is the table view itself. Views can be dropped onto view controllers. And so looking at this view controller, you have this panel on the left-hand side, which basically shows the hierarchy of what you're looking at in your storyboard. And you can see that this is just called view controller. And it has a view. So the view is contained within the view controller. This is just given to you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a table view to this view. And so I can just drag and drop onto that view. Boom, it's there. And iOS uses something called auto layout. So every time you rotate your device, you want your screen to also rotate. So the way that they've accomplished this so far is using auto layout and using something called they're called anchors, but basically you pin this square box to your view in some way. There's multiple ways to do it from the screen. The easiest way is using this little square TIE fighter. And what it's doing is we're going to add constraints to this view, to the table view, to that white view behind it. And all I want to do is pin it to the top, bottom, left, and right with absolutely no space in between. So I can literally just hit 0 for all of these guys. And notice it's just added the 4 constraints. It'll add those constraints, and now it's pinned to the maximum size of the screen. Now we have a table view. And what we want to do is add cells to it. So we're going to add a car cell, and it's just going to have the make, model, and the year, maybe a little bit more information about the car. So I'm just going to throw the cell, drop it right there onto the table view, and now I have basically a table view with one cell. And these cells are basically like, I can't think of the word. They're like kind of like blueprints or layouts of like what you're going to be like scrolling through. And so the cells are actually reused to save memory. Instead of having to like, let's say we're going to have like 10,000 cars. Instead of having 10,000 cells in memory, it probably only does the cells that are like on the screen. So there's probably only like 10. And so as you're scrolling really, really fast, it's just reusing those cells in memory as you're scrolling, so it's really, really seamless, and you're not, spiking the memory and everything. So this cell, I will tap on it, and I'm going to assign it a reuse identifier. And so I'll walk you through these tabs that you see here. This first tab will show you kind of what a general overview of where it's being used. So there's a target membership. Right now it's targeted to AutoTrader 2. That's already kind of given to you out of the box. You can also localize from here. So if your app's going to be published to different regions of the world, you can have your base, which is already automatically set to English for you, and then you can add more languages here, and so you can literally add localizations here in the storyboard. There's other options to use auto layout. That stuff is already kind of given to you. The next one is just kind of like information about what this is. It's a quick help. This is the identity inspector, where you kind of assign it some different things. We'll get to that in a second. The fourth one over has everything to do with the attributes of the TableView cell itself. So right now this is all kind of all out of the box. The style is custom. Selection, you can kind of change it to like when you tap on it to be blue, gray, etc. Anything that kind of adheres to that specific thing is built here. Then you have this ruler, which is your pretty much how you inspect the different sizes. Your constraints are going to show up right here. So on this ruler, what I did is I tapped on the table view. I can see that I have a trailing, leading, bottom, and top constraint. That's what I did when I tapped this button down here and added those constraints. You add more constraints, they're going to show up over here. And the last one is basically hooks into the code. So like when you start hooking this up to your code, you're going to start seeing some of these being grayed in. Like a button, you're going to have to hook it up to a function in your code, stuff like that. Cells are going to you're going to have to like, I can't think of any other word besides dress up these cells within your code. So we're going to start with just a few labels, and I'm going to throw that into our TableView cell. One label for the the make of the car, and then another label for like the year. And as you can see, I'm already running out of room. The default of this TableView cell is like I don't know, there's like a default. I think it defaults to 20. I'm going to set it a lot bigger just so I can start seeing some things. This in no way affects the height of the cell during runtime. This is simply so that you can see it in the storyboard a little bit easier. So I'm just going to make it big, 200. One more label for, so we have make model, and then the year. And right now there is no auto layout on this cell itself. So we're going to want to add the auto layout to this cell. So what I'm going to do is show you another way to start adding constraints. Let me just, oh no. I'm just going to spread these out so they're kind of like a little bit more even. Just dragging these around does not add constraints. You can come down here and add missing constraints, and you'll see that it automatically added some constraints for me. I don't use this because I like to manually add the constraints myself to kind of give it some better constraints because I have no idea what this is doing. Just looking, investigating it, it added a top constraint from the top of the make label all the way down to the center X of the year. I don't know. It adds some crazy constraints. So I'm going to hit Command Z. That'll take away the auto constraint things. But if you want to use it, go ahead. You might be headed for a headache. My teammate does it all the time and just kind of wings it. But we're going to add these manually. So to add a manual constraint, you hold Control, and then you click, and then you kind of come down to the object that you want it to go to. Right now, it's just going to be the content view of the TableView cell. So you can see it highlights it. The other thing you can do is Control click from the year label, and this is the same thing. This content view is the same as like this content view, if that makes any sense. So you can actually drag and drop to any of these items or any of these items. As your views get a lot more complex, it's way easier to just drag and drop over here, as opposed to having to drop into a view within a view kind of over here. It kind of becomes a difficult task. So I'm going to go ahead and do that anyways. So over here, dropping a constraint. And so now I have, okay, so constraints are between two objects. It's never between three objects. It's only between two objects. And it has to be a parent and a child. Right now, the label is a child of the content view. The reason I know that is because I can look at this hierarchy, and I can see that this is indented perfectly. It's not within a label. You could make this label within another label, and you do that by dragging and dropping it. It's probably not going to let me because it's too smart to do that. But anyways, it has to be a parent-child relationship. And so by dragging and dropping here, it knows it's a parent-child relationship. And I'm going to do bottom space to the container. And I don't think it took it. I don't think it took it, sorry. Let's try it again. Bottom space to container. No? There we go, finally. I'm not sure what was happening. So I'm just going to assign it, let's give it some 10, padding from the bottom. And then the label from year to model, we'll get it some vertical spacing. And so here again, I'll just do 10. And then from model to make, I'm going to give it vertical spacing and give it 10 again. And I'm just going to repeat this process until I make it to the top of the last label. So this one, I'm going to add a top constraint to the container. And I'm going to make it 10. And it's complaining now that, so the way that these cells determine their height is through a few things. First off, this table view that I edited over here, the row height and everything, it is set to automatic, so I think that's good. Let me see what it's complaining about. Oh, that's the other thing. Each one of these views needs 4 constraints. Well, technically it only needs two things to determine, which is an X position and a Y position. You can add a ton of constraints to it in order to determine the X and Y position. So it's not technically true that you need 4 constraints. You can actually successfully pin something with just 2 constraints. You can pin it to the center of like a view using the X position and the center of the view using a Y position. And that'll just center it within that view. That's the minimum amount of constraints you would need. In particular, here we have, so this label, as you can see, this label has 2 constraints, a top and bottom one. This one has a top and bottom one. But it doesn't know where to go within the view according to the X position. So right now I just have it pinned in the Y position. And so what I'm going to do is just drag over here and add a leading constraint. And I'll just make it like 10 or whatever it's going to do. And then to make sure, well, I'll just keep doing that. Leading space to container, leading space to container. And then it is complaining right now that the way that these cells get their height. So if you think about Facebook or even like a messenger app, what you're really seeing is a table view, but the cells are just like growing in size. So like messenger app, you know how there's a bubble with a, that's all that is a table view, and with text inside of it. And so the cell needs to grow according to how much text you add to that text message. So right now it's complaining that depending on how big this cell is, make, model, or year, these labels can either be stretched out or they can be squished according to these pins. Vertical hug and priority. So I'm just going to make one of these. I'm just going to kind of follow what it says. Make the set vertical hug and priority to 252. The other thing I can do is the TableView cell. I have it set to 200. If I just put it back, no, that's not going to fix anything. Oh, interesting. It actually calculated it for me. 44 was the complete height for it. Let's see if it will just literally just, I'm going to click this and then it's adding a suggestion for me. I'm just going to change the priority, like do the suggestion that it gave me. The other thing that's happening right now is it hasn't updated the storyboard, so sometimes you'll see these little yellow caution signs, and so I just kind of click them and kind of get them to go away. So now we have a TableView with a cell in it. We need to hook this up to the code. And so let me just, does anyone have any questions right now? No? Let me go try to get that data. Auto trader. Okay, let's see if this builds. Okay, so this is just code that I have that basically generates it's just 1,000 cars. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this into my project. Let me just run it, see if I don't crash or anything. Should be fine. You're not going to see anything different. It's literally just going to be a white screen again. Oh, no. It is a little bit different. The table view is there, but there are no cells. The way it kind of renders itself, if there's kind of no data, it just kind of renders the table view there, and you can scroll like indefinitely with these like line separators. Let's see if this will build. Wow. Both. Okay, great. So I'm going to start dragging some of these things into the storyboard in order to make a connection from that storyboard file into the code. So the way that a lot of people kind of do this is you can open up two windows, I believe. Right click.
The double circle does it normally.
This one?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so the double circle. So from the cell, you actually need to do something first. You have to identify the cell as kind of a custom cell, because that's technically what we're doing. We're creating a custom cell. And so you subclass something called a UI TableView cell, and we're just going to call it the cars cell. And what I'm typing right now is I'm creating a new class, and I'm calling it cars cell, and it is subclassing from UI TableView cell. If you're unfamiliar, does everyone understand inheritance? Okay, cool. So now this car cell has all the functionality that a UI TableView cell has, and I'm going to add custom logic and stuff to it. And so this car cell in the main storyboard, if I go to the cell, you want to identify that cell as the cars cell. And so we go to the identity inspector and change the class from UI TableView cell to a cars cell. Now you'll notice over here that it changed this to cars cell. That's pretty much the link you have between this XML file, which it gets from, it says inherit module from the target. It's actually looking at the code and saying, okay, where is this car cell? You can actually also do a drop down, and it'll give you all the options that it finds within your project for that particular type. So if I added another cell, for instance, and call it car cell 2, it should update on the storyboard which options I have to choose from. There it is, car cell and car cells 2. So we're just going to use the first one, and we're going to start making what's known as an interface builder outlet. And the way that you do that is you go open up the two circle button, and from the content view we have these labels, and I'm going to start making IB outlets for these labels. So if I just control drag from the label to the cell, it knows, since I've identified the cell, the car cell, it gives me the ability to drop there. If I try to drop anywhere else in the code, you notice like I can't do it. I can only do it here. It says insert outlet or an outlet collection. I've actually never used an outlet collection before, to be honest. Don't know what that is.
It's just an array of outlets that you define. So an outlet collection allows you to make multiple outlets to the same variable, and it turns it into an array of outlets.
What would you use it for? What would you use it for?
I had a Sudoku board, and
Okay.
so when I had the array of 1 through 9 in a cell for like notes or for notes. When you're taking notes on Sudoku, I just had an array of numbers, and that way I didn't have to have 9 outlets listed for number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and I was able to go through and iterate over them and enumerate them. So since it was just a list of numbers, enumerating it was all I needed to do to be able to identify which one I wanted. So I'll show it to you. I'll show you how
Yeah, I would like to see. So like if I have these 3 labels, can I make a collection with these? I'm not
it
really
would be
sure.
a collection view. The only problem is
They're
unidentifiable from each other.
That's what I kind of mean. Can I select all 3 of these and then drag and drop on here?
Yeah, I think so. For a collection. Yeah.
Right. So I have all 3 of these, and I'll change it to an outlet collection
And they'll be there in the form of an array.
in the form of an array.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Okay.
If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to create them one by one.
The collection outlet worked really well for my particular particular use case, but I don't.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of use cases that
Right.
make a lot of sense for
Yeah,
it.
I agree. I mean, I've been doing this 4 years and I've never used it. So I'm creating what's known as an IP outlet, and it's saying what the object type is. It's a car cell. So I'm gonna this. I'm making a connection between the make label. So I'm gonna call it the make label. It is of type UI label. So when I do a connection, oh no, why? I've never seen that before.
What did you say you've never seen?
This
Could not find information for class cars cell.
car cell. Very strange. I wonder if it's confused because I had the whole car cell 2 thing.
Possibly. Did you save the storyboard? Sometimes if you don't save it,
Yeah, I saved it.
you get weird issues.
I'm actually hitting Command S, but it's not changing the status of the main.storyboard. So one of the things as you start altering these files is you'll see these letters. M stands for modified. And then you can notice that the storyboard itself is in a like darkened state. That means you haven't hit Command S on that file. So it's like it's changed in memory, but you haven't actually saved it to disk. So what I'm doing on right now is I'm hitting Command S. This storyboard should light up like this launch screen, but it's not. I'm not really sure why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the simulator. If you ever get in weird states, what I do is I go to Product and Clean, and if you hold down the Option button, you get alternative options, and this is when you hold down the Option button, you get an option to Super Clean, and it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to clean the build folder? What that's doing is it's completely ripping out all the files that it needs to compile with, cleaning out with a fresh slate. And so if I try to build again, it's good. And I'm going to try it again here at this car cell. Another really neat trick that I don't think most people know about is if you hold down the Option button when you tap on one of these like drop-down menus, and this is true with pretty much all of Mac OS. So if you don't do it, it just only it's like an accordion. Only does the drop down for like the immediate ones underneath it. But if you hold on the Option key and then click on it, it completely unfolds the entire thing. So it's just like a quick way to open up the entire thing. So let's try this again. There we go. Must have been in a strange state. So I just successfully made my first outlet. I'm going to do it 2 more times. So that's the make. And this is the model. Wow. So I kind of see I already messed up. I meant to say make label. So if I change it here and then run it, I don't think it's going to crash right now. But basically, changing the name in your code without changing it in your storyboard will cause a crash if you are actually populating the cells. I am not, so it won't crash. But let me see. Let's see if it does or not. I don't think it should. It did not. But if I had data in here and I was actually populating this table view, it would actually crash. So you saw earlier I had it make model. I changed it to make label. The way that you can change it over here is there's 2 ways. You can open up this right-hand thing and open up this IB inspector, basically. And you can see that it says make model. You can delete it and then recreate it again. There's the delete button. So you can do it from here, or you can also right-click from here. And this is the same little text box as this over here. It's just showing you 2 different ways to do it. So the make model you can also go backwards from the code to the storyboard. So if I just click on this guy, I'm not even option clicking. You can click on these buttons. I can go back to the storyboard this way, and of course it's not going to let me. The storyboard's a little finicky, but trust me, you can do this. But it's not going to let me right now. But as you interact with these storyboards, you are going to get into these weird states. So it is good to know that you can go this way, and you can also go this way, just for your future reference when you're dealing with this sort of stuff. And I'm going to rename it Make Label. And so another thing you'll notice on this code, these IB outlets will have little circles next to them when they're successfully connected to your storyboard. When they're not connected to your storyboard, you're going to notice that there is no circle next to it. So as you're debugging and stuff like that, that is one helpful thing to check out to make sure your outlets are successfully connected to your storyboards. And we're going to do the last one. The way I do this personally, I don't use this double circle ever. I just double click on all the files that I kind of play with and just move them around. I use an application called Spectacle, which allows me to basically move the screen around. It's really nice. It's kind of like Windows.
There's another one called Magnet.
Is it? Nice. So I'm going to make that last label real quick, and it is the year label. And so now we are going to populate this table view. So one other thing we need to do is on this view controller, there is no IB outlet for the table view itself. We've made IB outlets for the custom cell, but we haven't done it for the table view. So on the table view, I'm going to drag it over to the view controller and name it table view. So now I have access to the table view within the view controller. A view controller is just an object that, one, it has a view. So as you can see, this table view, this view controller has a view. Every single view controller has at least one view attached to it. That's its subview. The way you can access it is if you just do self.view, that's the view. The other thing that a view controller does is it pretty much tells you when lifecycle events happen on the view itself. So when you run this application, what it's doing is there's a compiled version of your code, which is a binary, and then a compiled version of the storyboard. And when you run your program, it's going to try to look at your storyboard and load it from the XML file to rendering it to your phone. And so there's these lifecycle events. There's a moment where your view hasn't loaded yet. It hasn't been rendered to the screen. And so that event happens when, so this view to load happens when your view is actually ready to be used. There's a few other ones like view did appear, view will appear. These are what I mean by lifecycle events. They notify you when the view is going to go through some sort of thing. On view did load, when the view is ready to go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to I have to. So there's got to be a way that we can populate this table view, and the way that you kind of harness this table view's power is by setting yourself as a delegate. And so for the homework, you kind of learned about protocols. A delegate is just a protocol. It's a way to delegate work to somebody. And so in this scenario, we're delegating the work of the table view to populate the data and take its touch events and stuff to somebody. And so that somebody is going to be, I'm just going to make it this view controller. And so delegate is going to be UA table view data source. And that's basically, this is the delegate I was telling you about. It's a protocol that I'm adhering to, and so these methods will get called when the table view basically kind of first loads, and it's going to call like, hey, how many rows are there for this section? So table views have sections and rows. We're only going to make a table view with one section, and it's just going to have a bunch of rows. So these are all the kind of functions that we're going to need in order to populate this table view. And so that is the protocol there. What I need to do now is say the table view data source is equal to self. And the other thing that we need to do is, well, we'll start with that. Let me try to build this. Build failed. And I'm going to close the storyboard so I can have more room and you guys can see a little bit more. It says the type view controller does not conform to the data source, which is true. You will get this compile error if you don't conform to a protocol. Well, I'm going to get rid of this. And if you hit it's not going to help me for some reason. But if I just start typing, there are certain functions that you need to implement in order to get this error to go away. And one of those is the number of sections in the table view. The other one is the cell for row in a particular index path. And an index path is a structure that holds on to the section and the row. So think of it like column and row of the table itself. So a number of sections, we'll get to that in a second. So right now I'm just going to return 0. And this thing has to return so these functions you guys kind of learned from your reading. I don't know if you've played with them very much. But again, the arrow indicates what this function is returning. It's returning a UI TableView cell. So I have to return a UI TableView cell. Still missing some things. Let me see if I can. The other thing you can do when your compiler is yelling at you is you open up this little triangle, the issue navigator, and it'll kind of go through some of the things that you're missing. And it says, same thing that this does, type view controller does not conform. And it's telling me the candidate has non-matching type. I'm not really sure what's going on. But so number of sections, and the other one would be number of rows in that section. I think this should be enough. So this is the minimum amount you need in order to adhere to the UI TableView data source delegate. Does anyone have any questions yet? No? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set a breakpoint right here and run the application, and I should hit this breakpoint. Boom, it hits this breakpoint. If I had left this out, it's not going to hit that breakpoint because I'm not setting the data source to anything. So it didn't hit that breakpoint. If you're having trouble when you do this, remember to set the delegate or the data source. So now we have a data source. What I'm going to use is this cars model to populate the data. So I'm going to have a var, and we're just going to have cars, which is going to be an array of vehicles. And I'm going to initialize it to an empty array of the type vehicle. Are you guys familiar with like this definition? Yes? Okay. So on view to load, what I'm going to do is sorry, I'm not going to hold on to the array of cars. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to a model. We'll get to what a model is in a little bit. Basically, all it is an object that holds the data for your views. And so on on view to load, I'm going to initialize the model. And so let me set a breakpoint here and run this application. And so when the view does load, it's going to initialize the model. Notice it hit this breakpoint before it. Great. Sort vehicle. I have some like pre-code that I kind of got ahead of myself with where we're going with this. We're gonna end up having like options to filter and sort. I never actually got that to work, but we'll go through that when we get there. So again, going back to the application. I just ran it, and it hit view to load, and it's gonna create the model which has the array of cars on it, and then it's going to hit this guy, which is the data source. There's no race condition. That's just the order it's going to happen every time, which is great. Because if it hit this breakpoint first, it wouldn't have any data. Like the model wouldn't have been created. So there's things like called race conditions where this function could happen out of order. Like you want it to happen in a particular order. So now that I have a model, the number of sections is going to be the vehicles that count. So vehicles is just an array. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to return 1 here. Number of sections, like I said before, we're just going to have one section with a bunch of rows. The number of rows, however, is going to be the number of vehicles. And then here, in the UI TableView Cell method, this is saying, hey, this is going to get called whenever it's time to populate that table view. And so what we need to do is decorate the cell. And so actually, I always forget this syntax. UI TableView Cell dot DQ. I always remember this. Sorry, I will have to look it up. But remember when I talked about the cell is being reused. We need to use that reusable cell that we created. And so come on. Okay, this is the method that you use to basically reuse that cell. So it's just a method on the table view itself, and it's called DQReusableCell. So on the table view, so this method, when it gets called, it has 2 parameters: a table view and the index path. So what we can do is we can take advantage of the table view that it has, and we're going to create a car cell, and it's going to be TableView.DQ reusable cell with identifier. Do we use the index path? And the identifier, I'm just going to call it car cell. But in the storyboard, you need to identify it with an ID. So you do that by tapping on the cell itself, and then going to the no, that's not this one. I think it's this middle one. There's a identifier, and if you see the gray text, it says reuse identifier. I'm just going to call it a car cell, and that's basically what this code does. Is it looks for a reusable cell from the storyboard, from the table view, with this identifier. So I'm just going to pass in the index path that we're given to from before, and I'm going to force cast it as the type that it is, and that is should be a car cell. This DQ reusable cell, I can't make the text any bigger, but Man, I can't make it any bigger. This right here, it says it's, if you ever want to know what the functions do, again, you can question mark click on it, and it's saying the return type of this function is a UI TableView cell. That doesn't do us any good because it doesn't have the labels. We want the cars cell. So what I'm doing is I'm casting it forcefully as a cars cell. The reason why I know it's safe to do this is because I pretty much hooked up the storyboard, and that should work. So the car cell dot, now we have access to the different labels. So if you say make label.text and you're going to set it to, so now we need to grab the actual car in the array. And so what we can do is we can say let car is equal to the model dot vehicles. I guess I should start saying vehicles. Vehicle. And so this is an array. We can access it using an integer. And again, the index path is just a data structure that has the section, and it also has a row. Again, we're just doing one section with a ton of rows. So now I have access to the vehicle. And when we start decorating this cell, all I have to do is vehicle.make. Another cool thing you can do is if you double click on a variable or a constant, and you hit Control Command E, you can start refactoring just what's within that chunk of code, within the scope of the code. So as I start typing, you can see it changed both of those. So vehicle code dot model label dot text dot model dot year label. Thank you. So now it's still returning this guy. I don't want to return that anymore. I want to return the actual cell itself. And wow, I named that code. I'm really tired. VehicleCell. And instead of returning this guy, I'm going to return the VehicleCell. And so, did I do something wrong? Oh. So the text is a type string, and I can't assign an integer to it. So I'm just going to create a new string this way. The other thing you could also do instead of doing this is you can create a new string by just using the brackets, and then when you want to enter a parameter, it's kind of like this notation, and then you can just type in vehicle.year. So I'm going to run this application. This should give us some data, but I think the cells are going to look kind of funny because I kind of messed up the auto layout, I feel like. Yeah, so as you can see, you can't see. So we have the make and the year, but the model got squished. What we can do is there's this debug view hierarchy down here. I'm going to tap on it, and you can kind of see how it's rendered. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit and scroll up and just look at one of these instances. So we have Acura 2010, and oh, you know what? This data doesn't have any models because I couldn't figure out a way to like generate models, but that may actually be what's happening. Oh no, Xcode crashed. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
The as exclamation point
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
that means that you can force whatever you want into the return?
Only if it actually
Okay. Oh, yeah.
like if you try to when it compiles, Xcode will say that's not going to do anything, or that's going to always be nil, or you know, or this may crash. Like Xcode is usually pretty good about
Okay.
letting you know that, but then you'll run the app and your app will crash because
Because you're either pumping too much information in for it to hold, or it doesn't fit the style of
if it
information.
doesn't convert over, the exclamation point says basically force it, but Xcode's not happy about forcing things that
Sure.
don't actually want. You know,
Sure.
when you're using the exclamation point, you better know it's going to work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll crash.
So I probably shouldn't have done this because we kind of teach people who come like new into our community for like the mobile development not to use these exclamation points. But more specifically, this line of code, again, this function returns a type UI TableView cell. So from here to here, all this is doing is it's running a function that will return a type UI TableView cell. What I'm doing is this is actually this as exclamation point. This is a cast. So it's casting the type TableView cell to a new type cars cell. And so I should probably be teaching you guys to use the as question mark because it's safer. Your app isn't going to crash if it fails to cast it this way. The only way it's going to fail to cast it this way is if you messed up the storyboard. That's kind of what I said earlier. I'm really confident that I set up the storyboard correctly. But for beginning purposes and practices, it is much better practice to use the question mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a guard statement, which I think I've shown you guys. Have I shown you guys a guard statement before? So there's ways to unwrap optionals. So right now, let me delete that guard. If I question mark click on VehicleCell, this thing has become a car cell question mark, a car cell optional. And so this return type is returning a cell. It's not optional. You can't change this. This is again a protocol that we are saying we're going to conform to. So you can't change this. So you have to. That's why I kind of banged it to begin with. But that's again the question mark is known as a bang. So when I say I bang something, it's like it's the exclamation point. But so there now it is an optional car cell. There's two ways. There's a few ways to unwrap optionals. You can use an if let or a guard let. A guard statement is basically it's a happy path type scenario where the way I kind of envision it is I actually kind of think of it as like a filter. So as soon as you get into this method, you're going to exit early if you know that your data is bad. So the guard statement really helps you make sure that your stuff is like good to go. Otherwise, just leave the function early because you're wasting precious processor power to keep doing something. So it's like, okay, if I know I can't do it, just leave early. So if it fails to cast as a car cell, we're just going to leave early. So we're going to return you have to return something. So I'm just going to return a UI TableView cell. So now,
and that will just be empty.
Yeah, it'll just be an empty cell. And so again, what this is doing, it's saying instead of doing an if let, we're saying okay, anything past this guard statement, this vehicle cell will now be, it's no longer optional. It is 100% going to be there. So we're basically checking for this cast failing. And so now this vehicle cell is no longer optional. Does anyone have questions about that?
It's on video, right? So I can listen to it 5 times.
Sure, yeah. But you're gonna see like it really is like the other way to do that is to use an if let statement, and instead of doing this sort of thing, you would be doing, so you're saying if I can get this cell as a car cell, then you would do this, and you would return within the scope of this if statement. Else you got to do something else. You would return, else you would return UI TableView cell. That's the other way to write this this method. You can use an if let statement or a guard let statement. This is very, very simple. as your methods become more complex, as you're going to find out through like some of these more exercises we're going to do, you're going to run into a pyramid of doom where basically you have if this, go into this, if this, go into this, if this, go into this, and you're going to keep going. That's what's called the pyramid of doom of just if statements. To avoid those pyramids of doom, you literally just have one guard statement that says, hey, for this function, I need these requirements to be true. Otherwise, just return early. And so that's how you avoid this pyramid of if sort of thing. And it makes your code much more readable, and it actually saves on the processing, so you're not like doing all this sort of if checking. I'm going to go back to the guard because it is better practice to use it this way. So let's see here. That was the answer to the as exclamation point. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay. So last time I was confused. I thought the cell may have been getting squished. What actually wasn't. I'm generating 1,000 vehicles and I'm setting all the models to be an empty string. So I couldn't think of any car models, but like Honda, like Civic or something. I would have to write code that has like per make the models in them, and I just didn't want to do that. But you're going to see that Chevrolet now has a Civic, Audi has a Civic, stuff like that. So it actually wasn't getting squished. So it is actually there. It's not very pretty. So what I could do is on the text itself, I can add. So this make is of type string. You can add to string by using the plus sign. So I'm going to do make, kind of give it like a a little label or whatever. So make model and year. And with this particular instance, year is an integer. What I'm doing is I'm creating a string by the two brackets, so I can start typing in here. Year, space, and then it's going to use the actual value of year, cast it to, or create it into a string. So that'll clean that up a little bit. So this is just populating a table view. And so as you can see, there's 1,000 records, and it scrolls really, really fast. The other thing that you're gonna
Pulling from a database? Where's that pulling from?
it's a
I saw it's a random generator, but how does it know all your?
so
How does it know what random cars are?
I'll push my code out, but basically I created enums. And so I created a vehicle type, 4-door, 2-door, small SUV, etc., etc. I made an enum for make, and I just added all the cases here.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then I added a year, and I just did it 2010 to 2018. And
It's random generator. Okay,
I
that makes
basically random generated it. So if you look at this one line of code, it's creating. This is actually short syntax to create an array from a certain range. So that's what this ... is. It is a every collection can have a range, and so it's saying from 0 to 1,000. This actually is an array from 0 to 1,000 now, and so I'm mapping the array from 0 to 1,000 to a new array of 1,000 vehicles. And so I'm just like saying make select random, year select random. So every time I run this program, it's just going to be random. Okay, so we now have this table view completely filled with data. What I want to do is when I tap on it, you can see like nothing happens. I'll show you how to intercept these taps, and that is by adhering to the what is called the UI TableView delegate. And again, like this TableView.data source, I have to adhere to the delegate this time. So the delegate is of type UI TableView delegate. These two match, right? So delegate is equal to self. Is anyone confused about self? Do you guys know what self is? No. Okay, so when you're creating these like structures, a class is a structure, and it's a data structure. And right now, I think of it as what a lot of textbooks say is think of it as a blueprint. You're saying, okay, this view controller um, is going to be of this type. So right now, it is not initialized, and what that means is it's not in memory yet. It's still a blueprint. It's still a blueprint for a view controller. And so we're going to tell it how to design itself. But when it comes time to run the program, it's going to take your blueprint, and when it actually creates this view controller, it's going to take it from a blueprint that you said how to build it, and it's going to go ahead and build a view controller, put it into memory, and so that new instance of it in memory is what's known as itself. So this is like saying the table view, the data source, whenever it's running the program, set it to the initialized version of the view controller. I can post a little bit about like object-oriented programming, but that's what this is. These are objects, and so this right here, this class, is a blueprint, and so these classes, when they're initialized, create an object, which is stored in memory. So that's what this self is. I'll post some reading materials about some object-oriented stuff. It confused me like crazy. I learned Java first, and I'll be honest. Like my like 3 months of that semester, I had no idea what was going on because I just didn't understand what self was. But you're gonna see it in all languages, JavaScript, Java, like everything. Object-oriented programming is just like a design pattern that a lot of people use. So the delegate I'm setting to be this class, the view controller, but I haven't adhered to any of those new functions that I get by adhering to a delegate. So think about this this class this way. Before, this class was just a boring UI view controller. Now we're adding functionality to it by adhering to these protocols, and we're gaining power. We're gaining the power to populate a table view. We're getting power to intercept now the touches of when a cell is being selected. So what I like to do is what we've started to do at work and what everyone else is doing with Swift is you can create extensions to start breaking up your code. This code is very, very minimal, but I still like I don't know if I'm OCD or anything, but breaking up your code into compartments is kind of like, it just feels cleaner to me. So there's these things called extensions, and all you're doing is you're extending the functionality of your original class, and they can be used to break out and organize your code better. And so I know that these functions are the result of conforming to this protocol. So I'm going to clip them out of the original class and throw them into an extension. And I'm going to do the same thing with this delegate. It literally is just for organizational purposes. I could have left it up there and the class would have just got bigger and bigger and bigger, but this is just populating a table view. When you start building like more complex like applications, you're not going to just be populating table views. You're going to be doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So your files are going to grow to like pretty decently big. And so I just like this pattern. You guys don't have to do this. And so the UI table view delegate has methods like did select row at. And I just know these methods because I've been doing this for a while. The way you would go about maybe finding these yourself is by force clicking into the delegate it yourself. And this is the protocol right here. This is what you like. This is like the functionality you now have because you're adhering to this protocol. So I can pick any of these. Maybe you want to do something like before a cell is going to be displayed, like showing a spin error animation. Reading from a file, like let's say a picture. You know how when you're scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, those images first are like spinning? That's because they're reading it from disk, and that's that's expensive on a processor. This is just text, so I can scroll through this really, really fast. If you start reading from a disk, a photo, and displaying it on a cell, that's pretty expensive. And so your scrolling is going to suffer. You won't be able to just fly down this screen like I am doing right now. It's going to be choppy. It's going to just be, it's going to be very, very noticeable. And so to smoothen that out, you can just kind of, as you're scrolling through the table view, just have a default block of, maybe a black box, a spinner view, like a spinner that just spins, and load those images on a different thread so that it's not, we'll go into that in a little bit. So I'm at 7% battery. Does anyone have a charger?
Is there room on that?
Yep. I will have one. I'll get back. Where is it?
Thanks. All right. So back to this delegate. There is a ton of methods you can do. Display customization, the changing the height of the table view, stuff like that. And then called after the user changes the selection. So these are the things that are available to you. Also the swiping to, like, maybe you want to swipe the cell to delete it, or swipe to add some custom actions, stuff like that. That's what this is for. It returns like a array of actions you can take after like one of those is selected. So all I'm going to do is just do the did select row at. Did select, and if you just start typing, it'll fill it out for you. And notice there's no return type. Like it does. This is just a method that's going to get called when a cell is getting selected. So what we're going to do in the project is when a user selects something, we'll just take them into a new screen so they can get a bigger screen of like more information about the car. So to kind of show or indicate that this cell, when you tap on it, will go into a new cell. You guys are familiar with like the caret that is at the end of the cell of like, I think you can add it from the storyboard pretty easily. That's a built-in functionality of the cell itself. So if I go back to the inspector and there is a accessory, there is disclosure indicator, detail, maybe detail. I don't remember. Oh no. So you can see it added the little eye. So that's not what we wanted. The accessory. Check mark, detail disclosure, disclosure indicator. There we go. Disclosure indicator. It added the little guy over there. So I'll just print user selected row at index path, that row. And so all I'm going to do is do a simple print statement. And so as you can see, these cells now have that little caret at the end of it to indicate like when I tap it, I should go into something. And as you can see, I selected the row at 8. Scroll all the way down, selected the row at 113. And so that's where you're going to take some sort of action to go populate the new view with that car's data. So in order to go to a new screen, what we're going to do is we're going to add another view controller on the screen, and we're going to have to go from this view controller, which is a list of cars, to this new one, which is going to have details about the car. The way that you do that is on the cell, I think, you can drag it to this guy, and it's going to say, okay, these are your options. You can create a segue, make some sort of action. All I want to do is do a show, and that is basically a transition to a new view controller. And so that is just a link from that view controller to the other view controller. What we're going to do now is when the user selects it, we're going to want to go to that new view controller. And so we're going to create one more class, one more view controller class. This is getting kind of big. So class, I'm going to call it details, car detail, or vehicle detail view controller. Subclass it from UI view controller so that I can go into the storyboard and change its type to a vehicle view controller. And so what we can do is, I think I forgot how to do this, to be honest. Prepare. Oh my god, I did forget how to do this. Man, do you remember how to do this?
Sorry, I was not.
You're fine. If
What
I
are we doing?
tap on this and go to a new view controller,
To tap on the TableView,
uh,
go to a new view controller.
yes. I'll find it. Sorry, guys.
You want to stuff.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've worked in UI.
What? Oh, wow, there it is. Perform segue. Okay, that's it. So view controllers, there's another aspect to them. I told you about the aspect of it kind of controls. It has one view, and it holds the it controls the life cycle of loading that view and stuff like that. The other functionality that a view controller has is transitioning from one view controller to another one. So there's a built-in function on the view controller itself that is called perform segue with an identifier. So we're going to have to add an identifier to that segue, and sender, we're just going to say self. You don't. Okay. Sender is most likely always going to be yourself. It can at times be somebody else when you get kind of more complex views. But what that's going to do, I believe, it's going to call. Well, I'm not really sure, to be honest. So we're going to give it an identifier. We're going to go back to the storyboard, and this. Whoa! It played with my stuff. Go back. All right. So I'm going to give it an identifier. So you tap on the segue itself. And there's a identifier here, and we're going to call it show details. Save that, and then go back here, show details. And so what that's going to do is transition us to that new view controller. And that's pretty much it. What we need to do now is, if you were going to show the details on that screen, you want to send that data to that new view controller. So if I tap on it, actually all it did was bring a pop-up. I don't know if you guys saw that. Let me change the color of the storyboard so it's a little bit more clear. Main. And I'm going to change the background to like dark blue. And I don't really want it to come up from the bottom of the screen. I want it to slide. So that's what show does, I believe. It kind of, I think it's show detail. So we're going to try that. Run this again. And what I'm going to do is, just for debug purposes, there's a way to go. So in the simulator, there's options you have here. I'm going to turn on slow animations just so we can see what's happening. So I'm going to tap it. It did it again. It just kind of comes up from the bottom. Present, push, model. Let me try this one more time. Man. Well, I forgot, apparently, how to do this. Oh well. So that's fine. I guess we'll leave that there for now, unless you guys want to hang out for a second and just see if we can figure it out. Segue. Transition animation. No. I don't know. Anyways, animation is not important. We could figure that out at a different time. But what we want to do is take the data from that car and give it to the new view controller. So from here, so this will perform the segue. What we want to do now is, in the view controller itself, this is going to fire off a method that is called prepare for segue, and the first parameter is the segue itself. And so what we're going to want to do is, because you can have multiple segues, right? This isn't the only view controller you have. Maybe we have another button on the cell that will take you to purchase it. And so now you want to go to purchase view controller or something like that. So what we want to do is we want to check the ID on the segue, because we added that ID before, and it was this guy, show details. And so we'll do the vehicle detail view controller. So we're going to say vehicle view controller is equal to segue dot, well, actually it just gives us the destination as a UA view controller. So if we just forget what I said about the identifier, you could do that too, but the segue does have the instance of the view controller you're going to go to. So we can say if the destination is a vehicle detail view controller, then we can pass data to it now. So now we have the actual instance of the view controller that we're going to go to. And so if I just have a var that says car details, and actually we'll just hold on to the vehicle itself. And so now I can basically set the vehicle property. Nope, take this one. Set it equal to the selected vehicle. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hold on to these, like make note of what was selected. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to the selected index. So on the view controller, or let's say the model itself, where did the model go? Right here. So I'm just going to hold on to the index that was selected. So Let's just set it to 0. And then whenever the user taps on this, before we perform the segue, I'm going to set that index. So model.selectedIndex is equal to indexPath.row. And so now we have a selected index so that when this method gets called, why? Fix. Please fix it. Okay. So that when this gets called, we can use that index. So we'll say model dot. What we want is the vehicle, so we'll say model dot vehicles, and then so that will give us the data onto that view controller, and we could go ahead and populate something on the view controller. Just to kind of do it real quick, if we go back to the storyboard, just add on this blue guy there's another thing called a text view, and that's literally just it's a scroll view, and you can add a bunch of text to it. Right now it's just got gibberish. I'm not going to add any constraints to it because scroll views come with their own difficulties when you start pinning them, and I just kind of want to do this really quick. So what I'm going to do is go back to this view controller, and I'm going to make another IB outlet because we need to be able to access this in the code, and drag this over here, and it's going to be text view. No. So it gave me another weird error. So I'm just going to clean it and hope that it goes away. And so if I try to do it again, oh man, it does, what? It doesn't, I'm not really sure, but I'm just going to go ahead and make a new file and hope that it's better. So the way that you add new files to the project, I don't know if you saw this, I right-clicked on there and it had added new file. It's going to be a Swift file, and I forget what I called it, but I think it was like vehicle detail view controller. Name the new file, it'll save it, paste it here, and I'm just hoping that Storyboard's kind of not sure. Okay, so it doesn't know what UI view controller because UI view controller is in the library of UIKit. And so let's try this again. Yeah, it's like not fine. I don't know. It's just being really, really, really weird. I'm gonna kill Xcode. Arbitrator 2. Okay. Try this one more time. All right, finally, it worked. There's some bugs in Xcode. You just got to kind of deal with them. It's unfortunate. So, so now that we have set the vehicle on the new view controller, what we can do is actually, you know what we can do is just I'm just going to create a method that says set vehicle data. And I'm going to say with vehicle of type vehicle. So I'm just going to grab vehicle. And I'm going to say self.vehicle is equal to this vehicle. I don't know. I'm just going to hold on to it. And then I'm also going to change the text view to be, I don't know, some sort of stuff. Vehicle dot ID I'm just gonna like post some of the information about it.
A quick Google search suggests that the problem with that not being able to create the new outlet is an indexing issue. Xcode's having trouble indexing, and sometimes you have to force it to shut down.
Yeah. Cool. So, good job, Apple. Set vehicle data. So instead of accessing the vehicle directly, I'm going to use the new method I created. Send in the vehicle. Oops. So now when we get to that view, I guess we'll have something to look at least. And so that's how you pass data when you're performing a segue. One thing I did forget here is this is a method on view controller, which is a it's a subclass. It's inherited. Every time you override a function with inheritance, you want to make sure that you call its parent, and you do that by saying super. And so I did forget to call that. Okay, so if I tap one of these, I'm gonna crash, which is cool. The reason why it crashed is the text view is null. So it's, if I open this up, it'll say unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping an optional value. The optional value it's referring to in this case is the text view. PO is printout. The text view is nil. So there's a race condition. View to load was not called yet. So again, there's your race condition. So when the text view is available, it's going to be available when view did load. And so we're going to hold on to the vehicle. And so when the view did load, that's when we're going to set the text view.text. So I guess I could go ahead and get rid of that. And so what's going to happen is when we segue, this vehicle is going to be set. This information is going to be in memory so that when view did load gets called, we can use that information. And it is not liking this. Okay. So I'm not going to use that method anymore, and I'm just going to set the vehicle directly. I have some optional values in here, so it's just vehicle is optional, whatever. What does it want? When you see this, when we go to that screen, you're going to see like optional blah 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 blah, optional blah 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 blah. That's what these warnings are over here, and so it's advising me to use something called initialize a new string property using something called describing. So it's advising me to use this. And so that should get rid of the optional stuff there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions? That was kind of a lot of stuff. No? All right, I'll post this I'll post the video. I'll post the video, and then I guess for homework you guys can follow the video and just try to get to where I got today. And then next class we're going to start discussing actually making this app a little bit more functional with some sort of sorting and filtering. So we learned how to segue to a new view controller. What we're going to do is we're going to add a button up here that says like sort. Sort will pop up, something, a new view where you can. There's going to be a list of things that you can sort by. So it's going to be similar to the image that I posted on the iOS channel before. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to stop the video